This is a story about a girl who wanted to do something good, something small, something kind, and instead stepped into the kind of trouble that ruins lives. One innocent signature, one moment of trust, and her world collapsed like glass under a hammer. And the way it all ended will probably change the way you look at good deeds forever. Lisa never imagined danger could arrive quietly. It didn't come with warnings or threats. It came with a friendly smile, a stack of papers, and the calm reassurance that she was simply helping out. She believed him. She believed the story. She believed that kindness couldn't possibly hurt her. She was wrong. The day she signed those documents, she thought she was saving someone time. Instead, she unknowingly signed herself into months behind bars, fear, humiliation, and a system that didn't care about intentions. But what happened afterward? The betrayals she discovered, the choices she had to make inside the walls, and the decision that changed everything, is the part people never expect. Because sometimes prison doesn't just punish you. Sometimes it forces you to see who everyone around you truly is. And in Lisa's case, the truth was far more dangerous than the crime she never meant to commit. Lisa always believed that life punished bad people and protected the honest ones. It was a simple truth she carried from childhood. The kind teachers wrote on posters and parents repeated at dinner. Work hard, be kind, don't lie, and nothing truly terrible will touch you. That illusion shattered on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She had stayed late at the university library finishing a research paper. The air outside smelled like wet asphalt after rain, the sky heavy and gray. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel, a family acquaintance, someone her mother trusted, someone who had always smiled at her like an older brother. Lisa, can you help me for literally 2 minutes? I'm stuck at work. I just need you to sign as a temporary buyer so I can transfer the car paperwork later. Everything is legal, I swear, I just don't have anyone else nearby. He sounded rushed, tired, harmless. She hesitated, but only for a second. He had once helped her parents fix a plumbing problem and refused payment. He'd given her advice about internships. He felt safe. They met near a small car dealership at the edge of town. The office smelled like cheap coffee and old paper. A clerk shoved a folder forward, impatient, tapping his pen. Daniel spoke too fast, explaining that the owner had lost his ID, that the sale needed to be recorded temporarily, that she would be removed from the contract within days. Lisa didn't read every line. She didn't hear the warning in the clerk's sigh. She didn't notice how Daniel avoided eye contact during the final signature. Her name slid across the page in blue ink. Smooth, confident, final. And that's when everything began unraveling. 2 days later, the knock on the door wasn't polite. It was heavy, demanding, the kind of knock that makes your heart drop before your brain understands why. When Lisa opened it, 3 officers stood in the hallway. One of them read her full name. Another stepped inside, gloves already on. You're under arrest on suspicion of involvement in vehicle theft and fraudulent documentation, her mother cried out. Lisa froze as if her body had turned into glass. She tried to explain. She tried to repeat Daniel's name, the dealership, the papers. The officers didn't argue. They didn't even get angry. They simply acted somewhat calm, precise, mechanical, like people who had heard thousands of excuses before. At the station, everything moved fast and painfully slow at the same time. The cold bench, the fingerprint ink staining her skin, the metal door that closed with a sound that didn't belong in her life. She kept thinking there would be a moment where someone walked in, smiled apologetically, and said there had been a mistake. That moment never came. Instead, they showed her documents, the very ones she had signed, now labeled evidence. They explained that the car had been reported stolen months ago, that her signature made her a direct participant in an organized resale scheme. Her protests sounded smaller each time she repeated them. "Intent doesn't matter here," the investigator said quietly. "The paper says your name." For the first time, fear crawled through her like cold water. Not the fear of punishment, but the fear that the truth might no longer be strong enough to save her. That night in a cramped holding cell, Lisa stared at the dim ceiling and replayed the same moment in her mind. The pen touching the paper, Daniel smiling reassuringly. One signature, one good intention, and a door closing behind her with no promise of opening again. She didn't know yet that prison would not, only steal months from her life. It would also reveal who Daniel really was, why she had been chosen, and the cruel reason she was never meant to walk out clean. And worse, she had no idea that inside someone was already waiting for her. Lisa had always believed that prison belonged to another world, the kind seen only in documentaries or crime dramas. It was a place for dangerous people, not for students who helped family friends sign papers. But when the van door slammed shut and the engine roared, that illusion dissolved as completely as breath on cold glass. Metal rattled. The windows were barred. Every bump on the road made her brace instinctively, as though she might fall even while sitting. The other detainees avoided eye contact, each trapped in their own private storm of fear, guilt, anger, or indifference. One woman quietly cried without making a sound. Another stared blankly at the floor like she had already left this world behind. Lisa's thoughts churned. "It's temporary. They'll realize I'm innocent. There has to be a process. Someone will explain something." But no explanation came. The gates of the detention center slid open with a mechanical groan. Beyond them stretched gray concrete buildings ringed with razor wire. There were no dramatic shouts, no chaos. Only rules. Endless rules. Stand here. Walk there. Hands behind your back. Don't speak unless asked. Her belongings disappeared into a plastic bin. Her clothes were replaced with shapeless fabric. The cold bit through it instantly. A badge with a number replaced her name. That hurt more than she expected. The first night inside the cell felt unreal. 2 bunk beds, a small barred window that let in more noise than light. A toilet shielded by half a wall, a thin mattress that smelled faintly of disinfectant. Her cellmate, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes, studied her cautiously. "First time?" "Yes," Lisa whispered. "Don't trust anyone, not even the ones who smile." It was advice disguised as a warning. Lisa forced a nod, though part of her still clung to the belief that fairness would eventually prevail. Days inside moved differently, slow and sharp. Morning roll call, bland meals, short walks in the yard under watchful eyes. Interrogations where every sentence from her felt like throwing pebbles at a wall too thick to crack. She repeated the truth again and again, but each time the investigator flipped through documents, the same conclusion waited like a verdict already written. Daniel didn't answer her messages. His number suddenly didn't exist. That was the first moment she truly felt abandoned. Rumors traveled faster than footsteps behind bars. Within days, inmates whispered about the girl who signed stolen cars. Some saw weakness, others saw opportunity. One woman with a scar across her cheek leaned close during dinner. "You're not here by accident. People like you are useful." The sentence lodged in Lisa's mind like a splinter. Useful to whom? At night, sleep came in fragments. Metal doors clanged. Someone argued down the hall. Someone else laughed. A sound too loud, too empty. Lisa pressed her hands to her ears and silently repeated, "It will end. It has to end." But instead of ending, the situation tangled deeper. A lawyer finally arrived, sent by a distant relative. He flipped through the case file, frowning. The contract places you as the primary buyer. There are forged signatures layered around yours. It's sophisticated, not amateur. Someone used you deliberately. We need to prove you had no knowledge. She swallowed. Can you? He hesitated, just long enough for dread to bloom. We'll try, but until then, you stay. The phrase settled over her like winter frost. Lisa began to notice patterns. Which guards were strict, which inmates controlled the informal hierarchies, which corners were watched more carefully than others. She learned to walk quietly, to listen more than speak, to keep her emotions tucked away where no one could use them, and yet the mystery gnawed at her. Why her? Why that signature? Who had chosen her? And for what purpose? One afternoon during yard time, an older inmate approached her, calm, composed, unlike the others. She sat beside Lisa on the worn bench and spoke without turning her head. You're here because someone outside needed a clean name, and because they believe you won't fight back. Who? Lisa asked, heart racing. You'll find out, soon. They always reveal themselves when they think you've broken. The woman stood and walked away as if the conversation had never happened. For the first time, Lisa realized prison wasn't only punishment, it was a chessboard. And she was already a piece in a game she didn't understand. And somewhere beyond those concrete walls, the person who started all of this was still free, and already planning the next move. The days blended into each other, each one shaped by the same metallic rhythm. Doors slamming, keys turning, footsteps echoing down corridors. Lisa had begun to measure time not by clocks but by sounds. Morning was the scraping of trays. Noon was the click of locks. Night was the restless chorus of whispers, arguments, and muffled sobs. But inside that monotony, something new began to grow. Suspicion. She replayed every encounter with Daniel in her mind, rewinding like broken film. His easy smile, the casual way he'd handed her the documents. Just a favor. You're helping me avoid a mess. His reassurance that it was just paperwork. The confidence. The way he'd insisted she sign quickly because he was late for a meeting. None of it felt innocent anymore. Her lawyer visited again. Notebook full, expression tighter than before. We traced some signatures back to a ring involved in vehicle laundering, he said quietly. They use unsuspecting intermediaries, students, retirees, anyone with a clean record. You sign, they disappear, and the blame collapses on you. Lisa gripped the edge of the table. So you know I didn't do it intentionally. He nodded. We suspect, but suspicion isn't proof. The hardest part is showing deception when the paper says you agreed. The guard called time. Lisa stood up reluctantly. As she turned away, the lawyer added almost apologetically, There's someone else we're trying to locate, a man who appears in several cases like yours. We don't have a real name yet, only an alias, Gray Line. If he exists, he's the link. Gray Line. The word lodged in Lisa's mind and refused to leave. That night, her cellmate watched her stare at the ceiling. You look like someone finally told you where the trap came from, she murmured. Maybe, Lisa whispered, but I still don't know how to get out of it. Her cellmate shrugged. You don't break the trap. You learn how it was built. Then you wait. Waiting became a weapon. Lisa began to notice the flow of information inside the prison. How rumors traveled, how favors were exchanged, how certain inmates seemed to know more than guards. One of them, the older woman from the yard, nodded at Lisa days later. Walk with me, she said simply. They circled the track slowly, two blurred shapes under an unforgiving sky. Your papers. Someone inside the system helped process them, the woman said. Fraud that clean needs cooperation. Inside? Lisa repeated. A clerk, an officer, maybe more. Someone signed off so no one would look twice. That's why you're dangerous. You didn't just sign a document. You saw something you weren't meant to see. Lisa frowned. I didn't see anything. The woman's lips curved faintly. Not yet. But the people who set you up think you might. A chill slid through her. Later, during a scheduled call, she heard her mother's voice tremble through the static. We believe you, her mother said. But people talk, Lisa, neighbors and colleagues. They think. I know what they think, Lisa interrupted gently. Just hold on for me, okay? After the call ended, tears threatened, but she swallowed them back. Emotion here was currency, and she had none to spare. The next turning point came unexpectedly. During routine chores, a guard dropped a file, papers scattering across the polished floor. Instinctively, Lisa knelt to help gather them. For a moment, her eyes flicked across a familiar form. Authorization logs, signatures, transfer slips. And there, buried in the details, a marking she recognized, a small symbol. A line that curved then halted abruptly. Gray line. Her breath froze. It wasn't proof, but it was a sign. Inside this very building, the same symbol appeared on transfers involving stolen vehicles. Someone connected to her case was working behind these walls. That night, she lay awake with a realization pulsing through her. She wasn't just a victim. She had become an unwanted witness. And if she ever reached the truth, if she found the person behind the alias, two things could happen. She could finally clear her name, or someone would make sure she never got the chance. For the first time since her arrest, fear didn't paralyze Lisa. It sharpened her. She would watch. She would wait. She would learn the rules, not to obey them, but to understand which ones others were breaking. Because somewhere between the paperwork, the silence, and the shadows of the prison corridors, Grayline was still out there. And he had already made a mistake. He had underestimated her. This story continues to show how a single signature can become a weapon, and how a system that should protect can quietly turn against the innocent. Days in prison had taught Lisa one lesson above. All information moved like contraband. Whispered, traded, hidden, and sometimes dropped by accident, like that scattered file with the strange marking she now couldn't forget. Grayline. The name haunted her as much as the echo of keys in the corridor. She began studying everything around her with new intent. The way guards rotated posts, the stack of paperwork carried through the halls, the small moments when routine turned careless. She didn't have access to documents, but she had something else. She had eyes. One afternoon, she was sent to the administrative room, a sterile office lined with cabinets and cold fluorescent lights, to help organize old files as part of her rehabilitation duties. Two guards supervised, talking idly, barely noticing her beyond the occasional warning. Keep them sorted. Don't read anything. You're here to help, not to learn. She almost laughed at the irony. Lisa worked quietly, moving stacks, stapling, filing. But with every page that crossed her hands, she scanned for patterns. Recurring names, identical signatures, transfers processed at suspicious speed. And then, she saw it again. Not the name, but the symbol. The curved line abruptly ending. A notation on a form marking vehicles as reclaimed property before they were resold. The buyer listed was a shell company. The witness signature belonged to a clerk she had never met. Yet the symbol linked them all. She exhaled slowly to keep her hands steady. Curiosity had to look like misunderstanding and nothing more. A guard approached, glancing over the stack. "Move faster," he muttered, bored. She nodded meekly and resumed. But inside, something aligned. A trail existed. Paper didn't just record crimes. It remembered them. And somewhere in those records, her own trap had been built piece by piece. That night, during recreation hour, she sat at a table with the older inmate again. Cards shuffled lazily between them. "I saw it," Lisa whispered quietly. "The symbol. It repeats." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "And it isn't random. It marks vehicles that disappear. They get cleaned on paper before anyone checks." The woman leaned back, studying Lisa with new respect. "Then whoever runs it isn't sloppy. They're confident. Confident people leave signatures, habits. Egos don't like being invisible forever." "Then I can prove it," Lisa said. The woman shook her head slowly. "Proof is heavy. You can't carry it alone here." The warning lingered. Still, the idea of passively waiting gnawed at Lisa more than fear itself. She started asking quiet, harmless questions. Not about crime, about bureaucracy, about how transfers worked, about who signed what. Some inmates had once worked in offices. Others had relatives on the outside dealing with similar issues. Piece by piece, she built a map in her mind. And she noticed something else. One particular officer always appeared when documents moved between departments. Calm, polite, unremarkable, almost invisible by design. Officer Hale. He spoke in measured tones, never raised his voice, never lingered unnecessarily. But every time her name appeared in conversation, his gaze sharpened in almost imperceptible ways. One afternoon, as Lisa filed into the corridor, Hale stopped her. "You've been assisting with admin work," he said lightly. "Good behavior noted. Keep it that way." There was no threat in his voice, which somehow made it worse. "Thank you," Lisa replied, careful, neutral. He nodded and walked away. But his presence had chilled her. Something in his composure, the rehearsed calm, matched the cold precision she'd seen on the documents. That night, sleep refused to come. She stared at the faint cracks in the ceiling, tracing them like roads on a map. What if Greyline wasn't outside? What if Greyline had a key? The thought was dangerous, terrifying. But it also explained everything. The speed of her case, the clean paperwork, the way she'd been lost in the system instead of investigated properly. And yet, another truth pressed close behind it. If someone inside realized she was connecting dots, they might decide to remove the problem quietly, not violently, not obviously, but with a simple bureaucratic transfer to somewhere harsher, somewhere louder, somewhere where people vanished without questions. She had to move smarter now, not louder. The next time her lawyer visited, Lisa leaned forward carefully. "You said he has an alias," she whispered. "Greyline, stop looking on the streets. Look in the files. Look where signatures repeat." He blinked, thoughtful. "Inside the system?" She nodded. "Inside the system." He scribbled. Not argument, not disbelief, a promise of investigation. When Lisa was escorted back to her cell, she felt something she hadn't felt since the beginning. Not relief, but momentum. She was still trapped. Walls, guards, schedules, yet the story was no longer just about her suffering. She was walking through a labyrinth where someone powerful believed they controlled everything. And now she had seen the thread leading out. The question wasn't only whether she could prove her innocence. The question was whether she could survive long enough to follow it. Because the higher the truth climbed, the more dangerous the person at the top would become. And somewhere beyond those walls, the name Greyline waited. Silent, patient, watching for a mistake. This story tells of a girl who wanted to do a good deed but ended up in serious trouble. And what happened next will surprise you. Lisa had thought she was only helping a neighbor. She had barely glanced at the documents, trusting the friendly smile and casual assurances. "It's just a quick signature," he had said. But in that signature she, so unknowingly, claimed ownership of a car registered as stolen. The police arrived one morning. She remembered the sharp knock, the uniforms, and the sudden intrusion. She froze as officers explained the charges, her mind refusing to process the words. "Stolen property," she whispered, disbelief clouding her voice. Her neighbor was gone, vanished before her eyes, leaving her alone with the accusations. Every attempt to explain, to prove her innocence, felt futile. Her identity, her clean record, her good intentions, none of it mattered. She was cuffed, read her rights, and escorted out of the familiar streets of her neighborhood into the harsh world of detention centers. Every step echoed the collapse of her ordinary life. Inside, reality was harsher than Lisa could have imagined. The metal doors, the cold floors, the endless rules, all of it was suffocating. She spent hours replaying her choices, wondering how one innocent signature could spiral into months behind bars. Other inmates eyed her with curiosity and suspicion. She had to learn quickly that in this world trust was scarce, and every action carried consequences. Simple interactions could shift the balance. A misplaced word, a glance, a delay in response. Every day was a test of patience, observation, and endurance. Lisa found solace in the small routines she created, reading, noting patterns among guards and prisoners, learning who could be reasoned with and who could not. Survival was no longer about innocence. It was about adaptability, perception, and careful decision-making. Lisa was released temporarily, but the world outside felt alien and threatening. Her reputation, once unimportant, now followed her like a shadow. Strangers, neighbors, and even acquaintances looked at her differently. Letters arrived, some supportive, others cryptic, reminding her that her past had not been erased. One evening, walking home, she sensed someone following her. It was subtle at first, a reflection in a shop window, a shadow at the corner of her eye. But her instincts, sharpened by months behind bars, did not deceive her. When a message appeared on her phone later from an unknown number, her heart froze. "You thought it was over. It's not. Be ready." Fear mingled with resolve. She realized that freedom did not mean safety. The world outside had its own dangers, and survival now required vigilance, strategy, and awareness beyond anything she had learned inside. Weeks passed. Lisa had built a cautious routine, keeping her distance, observing patterns, and preparing for potential threats. She could feel eyes on her everywhere, sometimes real, sometimes imagined, but she refused to let paranoia control her. Then one day, a familiar figure approached, the neighbor who had set everything in motion. He looked nervous, unsteady, as if the weight of his own deceit had finally caught up. Lisa confronted him, but instead of vengeance, she felt clarity. This time she held the power. She had learned the value of patience, discretion, and strategy. The final twist was subtle. Her innocence was recognized, legal matters cleared, yet the experience had changed her fundamentally. The world she returned to was the same yet unrecognizable, shaped by her choices and the lessons of survival. She had survived, but the question remained. Would the world outside demand the same vigilance she had learned behind bars? Or could she finally reclaim the ordinary life she once dreamed of? The story leaves a question lingering in the air. When the past collides with the present, how do you truly regain control? Lisa had survived the prison, but surviving life after it required something far more intricate and far more unpredictable.